Okay, it is 1 o'clock and we are going to get started. Just looking for Dr. Barnett. If you're on under a different name, you're going to have to chat that in and let me know so I could promote you to a panelist. In the meantime, we have our other guest here and we are going to get started. So I'll start by saying hello and welcome, New Jersey. And I know this travels beyond New Jersey. So welcome to the world, because everybody is interested in the research that's going on now. They're interested in the stories that are occurring each and every district because we want to bring our children back and our staff back, but we want to do it in a safe manner. So today we have a webinar set up and we have some extraordinary folks that will be joining us to share some input. And this idea of having a weekly webinar for educators and leaders throughout the country started with Dr. Barnett, and he's going to be one of the people sharing with us today. If you don't know Stephen, well, you should really get to know him. He is the senior co-director at NEAR, which is the National Institute for Early Educational Research. He's been doing it quite some time, and if you mention Stephen's name in certain circles, especially early childhood circles, everybody giggles a little bit because they want to know him. So he called me a few weeks ago, a few weeks after actually COVID broke, and said, Michael, I have an idea. Let's educate the world through social media and through this platform. And I jumped on board. With us, he said, why don't we extend that to Penelope Latimer, who is the former Assistant Commissioner of Education for New Jersey and has done tremendous work throughout schools, throughout districts, throughout New Jersey, and we're happy to have her on board as well. Also helping navigate this has been Karen Garver. She's the former chief of staff for the state of New Jersey, but she spent many, many years in early childhood education, and now she finds herself at NEAR. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the help of Ernie and Diego, who are our tech-minded assistants who bring this to life every day. So thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you here today. This is moving New Jersey schools forward. I see Stephen Barnett has arrived fashionably late as expected. Let me introduce you exactly who you're going to hear from today. And we will start. Hold on, I have a great list here. I've already mentioned Steve Barnett from NEAR, but he's going to be joining today to add some input. So welcome, Stephen. As I call your name, if you could just unmute your screen and your audio, that'd be awesome. So I see Steve has joined us. We also have some other people, and I'm excited about them because some of the people in the audience actually know who they are. We have Amy Hornbeck. Now, Amy's done some tremendous work. We traveled together and presented together, and she's done some work in Long Branch schools, and now she finds herself in Beverly City as a master teacher. So welcome, Amy Hornbeck. And then we also have some special guests that are coming on today, and they are from Wonder Why. And we have the senior advisor, Ed Green, is with us. But we also have the founder and president, Latoya Adams. And what Wonder Why is, it's a group, and they probably can share a little bit more about this, but they provide research and consulting to children's media, also to education and technology. But we are excited to have you here with us today. And the rules of the game are pretty simple. I'll walk through some questions and throw them at you specifically. But if you have something to add to the conversation, please feel free to do so. For those of you who are attending today and in the audience and just curious about opening your early learning centers for our youngsters, if you have a question, just use the Q&A feature. You can put it in. Our guests can see the question, and at some point we'll have an opportunity for them to ask that. We should be on for about an hour, so buckle up, take some notes, and I'm sure it's going to be a great learning experience. So we will start. If everybody could just say hello so they know. Amy's name is up there. Perfect. Latoya Adams is up there.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen. How are you? And
Hi, this is Latoya.
Hi, Latoya. I got you, Latoya. Okay. I'm glad you said that. And then where's my friend Ed?
You have to put me on. I won't let me open up.
No, I have all the control in the world now. So I will certainly allow you to. Now you're going to be asked to start your video. If you click yes, you're check out this, there he is, Ed Green, everybody. He had a more attractive background before. I don't know what happened to the Wonder Why background.
I decided I'd go with the flow and not be too obvious with my
It's great.
graphics.
It's great. Well, listen, we're happy to have you here today, and we are going to start off with the person who conceptualized this idea of educating the world through Facebook and through Zoom. So we're going to start with Stephen. So Steve, I looked at the number of days now. It's 132 days since we closed schools. 132. And if you turn the hourglass upside down, we've got 40 days before we're supposed to open, and any information is good information at this point. So Steve, what have we learned? What have you heard? What are you reading? What have we learned over the past several months, over those 132 days that you can share? It's real specific about serving children.
Well, I'll start with with what we know about transmission. Right? No doubt everyone's heard Secretary DeVos' statement that children can be a brake on the spread of COVID-19. That's not entirely true, but it's not as untrue as some in the media would have people believe. Young children, especially under 10, are very unlikely to contract the disease and much less likely to transmit it. If they get it, they're much less likely to have serious consequences that we know of. Right? Important caveat. And it's possible you are better off getting it from a young child because the exposure they give you is more limited. It's almost, I'm not going to say it's a vaccine, but it's the same idea of you get an attenuated dose, you get a reaction, you recover quickly, you develop some immunity. And there are scientific papers that suggest for that reason, they might be somewhat of a break. But that doesn't mean they're at no risk or that they pose no risk to others. Just that they're not necessarily major spreaders. If we look across other countries that have opened up, it's pretty clear that they haven't had much of a negative impact, if any, from young children as opposed to older kids in school. And I think an important point in thinking about your plan is because they're not in school doesn't mean they won't be at risk. Either at risk if they're in crowded homes with lots of adults and other kids coming and going, or they're at risk because they're in childcare because their parents have to work. And that raises questions about hybrid options, where if you rotate days or have half days and the kids are in other environments, you've now multiplied their contacts. And that's the worst thing to do. Right? If there's any principle here, it is maintaining a stable group or bubble for the kids and the adults and not letting other adults in there. So schools have to think outside their boundaries about collaborating with childcare, about what's going on with parents' work, about other organizations that might provide space, help, allowing you to maintain small, consistent groups of kids. And same thing with adjacent districts. I'm sure all of you have thought about, if I open, but my teachers' districts don't open, and my teachers' kids can't go, what happens? Right, so it's a, then the last point is we need to have joint guidance. Right, childcare and preschool and Head Start can't be operating under different rules if they're going to partner.
So it's the first time I've ever heard something you just said, and it's not a good option, but you said, if you're going to get this virus, you might as well get it from a young child. I've never heard that before. And it's pretty interesting that you share that. We're all trying to make decisions to bring our students back but what's weighing on our mind is keeping our staff healthy in this process. I can't tell you the amount of sleep I've lost just considering the health of our staff. And not only that, we have these multi-generational homes, right? Where kids are living with grandparents, living with aunts and uncles, or even living with a parent who's health compromised. So I'm glad you shared that with everybody. And I think that's really important. But if we're really taking a look at things that we've learned, so what are some of the mitigation strategies for keeping our young kids healthy? So we don't want them to have it because we know they can spread it. I mean, even if it's a small degree. But what do we do to keep them healthy? What are some good strategies that schools can implement?
Well, there's a long list. I'm going to go through it quickly, but you know, people who want the details can email us at NEAR. We'll be happy to provide them. And this is just, you know, it's somewhat speculative about, you know, do I want to get it from a young child, as opposed to maybe I don't want to get it till there's a vaccine.
Right.
But if I were thinking about this, I would, you know, there's so much we don't know. So I'll preface everything else by saying I would do what Newark did, which is start with small numbers of kids in a couple of schools over the summer. Not a lot of summer left, and try it out. See if it's safe. You can do it well with people who volunteer for this on a small scale. And then if it works, you've worked your way through it to demonstrate to your parents and your staff that you can be safe and effective. And plus you're ready to go into full-scale drill in the fall. And then start with P3, do it for a month, and then maybe add 4th and 5th, right? So having said that, 3 broad strategies, right? Screen and exclude based on illness and high risk for not just the kids, the staff, right? Mitigate the risks if you're doing it in person. Now I'm blocking on number 3. Oh, and control the risks through small, stable groups, right? And that stable group part is probably the most important. Do not let specials, adults, multiple staffing, anything you can do to avoid that. So what does this mean? If you can get people to do it, I would have 14 days of home screening, temperature checks on everyone in the household for staff and students with no travel prior to the start of school, and have everybody sign off so that you know no one's coming in who has COVID if you're going to do live. Ongoing, and then you keep that screening ongoing. The parents screen for the temperature, and not just temperatures, because it's not clear young children will have temperatures if they have COVID. So you have to keep that screening going, and you have to screen the adults who are bigger risks of being spreaders also daily. Encourage the staff to maintain social distance, wear PPE, mask up, avoid congregate activities, not just in school, out of school. I can't tell you how many times I see people, once they're off the clock, I'm not just talking schools, the mask comes off, the social distancing stops. It's like, no, the risk didn't change because you're not getting paid now. And maybe emphasizing the same thing with parents about making sure they know how to minimize the risk to their kids and families. I've said this already, but I will keep repeating it. Maintain intact groups. Right? If you can divide your preschool classes either within a classroom or across spaces into 2 groups, and have the assistant in one group and teacher in the other. You've now got smaller group size, but then nobody crosses the boundaries. The kids don't cross, the adults don't cross. They can talk to each other on their phones. Maximize out, and then to the extent you maximize outdoor time, social distancing where possible. Now, you know, that there's a gradient there from preschool through third grade of how good kids are going to be at that, but you can provide tools, like, you know, some places use hula hoops. This is your space. On the other hand, social play is important. You don't want the kids not playing and not interacting. The PPE is important. There are clear masks. I don't know why we're not mass producing these for young children and their teachers. Clear masks that are effective, and face shields. You can still see expressions. You can see how their mouth is making the words. And I mean, all the things you care about don't have to disappear. Hand washing, sanitizer, you know, the idea of having portable hand washing things for kids, touchless things all over, so that you don't have people congregating, waiting in line. We do enough waiting in line in early childhood programs anyway, right? Cut that out. And they're cheap. Ventilation improvements. And this is not necessarily cheap, but it bears thinking about what can you do to improve the airflow, whether it's filters or opening windows. There are some new things like UV light treatments and something called sodium hypochlorite fogging between uses. Time in the group matters, right? So this is you know, if I can get a bigger balance of outdoor time, if I can move my specials off out of school, children spend less time in the group, and less time in close quarters, there's less opportunity for infection. And same for the adults. Reducing transportation by bus. I would do anything I could do to keep kids off buses, but if you have to do buses, can you get windows open? Can you get kids to at least wear the masks on the bus? Can you get a physical barrier between rows and clean them up between uses? But you know, this is again a consideration. If people who are thinking half days instead of full days, does that mean that parents won't be able to pick their kids up? And now we have to have increased busing? That's probably counterproductive.
Steve, you said you were going to start small, and I have a list of 100 things in front of me now. Thank you. And the list can go on and on. Actually, you really just hit on so many great things. I do want to throw a curveball at you now. There's preschool teachers on right now, and they are wondering about a couple things, I'm sure. One of them is this: what about shared toys, shared space, you know, where kids are using manipulatives? Are there anything we learn from that? And then the second piece is, what about those unfortunate situations that me being a former preschool teacher have been in that space? Kid sneezes, kid has to go to the bathroom, kid washes his hand, kid coughs on you. Can you give us any strategy for any of those that you've learned?
Well, absolutely. We're really good at cleaning in preschool, right? The preschool cleaning procedures need to get moved up to K3. That's something we already know how to do. We know that some surfaces are better than others, you know, so trying to maximize the surfaces that are least conducive to the virus. And I'm not the expert in that, but it's easy to get a list. as well as frequent cleaning, but also if you can keep your kids in play pods, you know, where they're interacting with only 7 kids or 3 to 4 are in their pod, and they share, but they don't share outside that, then you minimize that problem. And if the kids are wearing either clear masks or face shields, then that's going to minimize the spread. I think there's some opportunity for PPE. If I were a teacher, I want a disposable smock, right, or jumpsuit. They're not that expensive, or even one that could be cleaned. And everybody has, just like everybody has their snowsuit. If you're doing preschool in winter in Michigan, everybody has their little COVID-19 suit. And you wash them frequently, so that I've got a one piece to wash. I don't have to worry about all my clothing as a teacher.
I'm envisioning scrubs right now, Steve.
Yeah.
That's it looks like I might have to change the dress code policy for staff, which is okay. I do want to jump into something. I don't want to get caught up on all the operational pieces, but there is an impact upon the educational piece, which I know you've evaluated. We know it. Anybody who's an early childhood educator understands that remote and face-to-face, they might accelerate learning at the secondary level, but in the early childhood level, it's been quite a challenge. So tell us what you've learned so far about that.
Well, but that's exactly right. We all know that online preschool is an oxymoron, that children learn best through social play. Digital play is not a substitute. Not that there's not a role for digital play, especially with interactive media as opposed to passive media, but it's not, they're not substitutes. So figuring out, anything other than in person will be second best. Having said that, you're going to hear a lot about how second best can be a lot better than it was. We did a survey, a nationally representative survey. It's going to be releasing the results Friday morning. You can get those at near.org on Friday. In short, it was a disaster. When preschool programs closed down, no one was prepared, right? And so that's part of it. We ought to be better prepared in the fall. But even if you're better prepared, it's really, really tough. And so you have to think about, how do you provide the same kinds of things in a remote situation? I think the elements of that are a daily schedule led by teachers that's communicated to parents, daily interaction between the teacher and the child and the parents, daily lessons. Intentional teaching, when we say lessons, doesn't mean worksheets. Right? These are activities for parents to do with their kids that are well specified, perhaps with videos of how those work. Book reading, frequent outdoor play and exploration, organizing parent connections. You read a lot these days about high-income parents forming these pods for their kids and maybe taking their kids out of school, having their own pods with their own teachers. Well, if you're doing remote with young children, schools could help parents organize the pods for their own children so they can play together. Maybe I've got 4 other kids, so I'm not isolated. And I get the interactions with the parents, but don't just leave that up to them. How do we facilitate that? Ensuring everyone has the connectivity and the devices to participate. It's an obvious one, but the extent to which that's uniform is going to make what the parents do easier, make what the teachers do easier. And you might have to provide books and play materials, right? Everybody doesn't necessarily And I think our son had more Legos than his preschool program did at home. That's not true for every kid, right? And making sure that they have the, books are powerful, making sure they have those, the blocks, other kinds of materials for kids. Sure, there are things parents can make at home, but they need help figuring that out too. So this puts a ton of responsibility on the parent. And not everybody's going to be in a position to take that on. And even those that are going to need a lot of help. We have an example of this from Pre-K for SA, that's the San Antonio preschool program, setting out in detail exactly how they're going to do this kind of remote preschool education. They're going to have half their parents in, which makes that job easier, and half out, which means they have to do a good job on remote and be prepared should they have to close down, right? And we're going to share that plan on the Facebook site, but also if anyone wants us to send it to them, email Karen Garver, kgarver@near.org, and we'll send it out. You're going to hear a lot more from the other presenters about this.
Well, a great start to this conversation, Steve. So I appreciate all the research you've done so far and the resources you're providing. Actually, I had a parent ask me just recently in a survey that we sent out, said, have you considered anything in the evening? And then, like a light bulb went off, like, oh, night school for preschool, and I haven't heard that concept before, but I'm telling you, we started really conceptualizing what it looks like when parents come home at 5 o'clock and what a night program could look like in addition. So it was just an idea, but it leads me to our next guest that's on, because if anybody knows the struggles of a working parent, it is Amy Hornbeck. And Amy's really an expert in so many different areas. And I really would like to hear your input, Amy, regarding what are some of the challenges that caregivers and parents are facing right now, and if we continue on this remote path any longer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think with the governor's announcement that the virtual schooling will be an option, should people want it, it's going to happen everywhere, right? So even if a district has a plan to come back in a hybrid, there's going to be some families who opt to do completely virtual. So we do need to be prepared. And yeah, we learned a lot this year. So right now I had the great experience of being full-time in a district during this crisis and working on the ground every day. And it really helped me take all of the research and all of what we know and apply it. And so one of the things that we did learn, like Steve touched on materials, and that's the first thing we always go to, right? Is do parents have what they need? Obviously for the tech piece, but also for the hands-on play. And what we found was, honestly, families have a lot, not all, but families have a lot of what they need to play sometimes, and that surveying families and finding those needs so that you can fill those gaps is much more effective than just assuming people have or don't have certain materials. But more than materials, the struggle that was almost a universal struggle with families was switching to that mindset of being a teacher. We always say parents are children's first teachers, but parents don't necessarily see themselves that way. So organizing learning activities to start at home was something that parents needed a lot of support with, both the how-to and then also the emotional support. Because a lot of times when they would try to do an activity, whether it be hands-on or virtual, and it didn't go how they wanted it to go, they could be very disheartened, and you would see sort of a drop off in engagement. And so re-engaging parents and keeping parents engaged was a primary goal we had the entire shutdown, and something I think we learned a lot about it, and I'll share that today, but it required a lot of scaffolding of parents. And also the buy-in. A lot of districts, I've talked to so many of my friends all throughout New Jersey in different districts, and a lot of districts were providing a lot of resources to parents. But if parents don't see the clear direct link between how this is going to help their child learn or how it's going to help their child grow and be ready for school or whatever they value, they struggled with the effort it might take to do the activity. So, really recognizing that parents need that information and to buy in to do it. Otherwise it's just a bunch of stuff and, so, and that's a lot because that isn't necessarily the orientation that teachers teachers are oriented to the children, not necessarily to the parents in the same way as educators across the board. So that's a shift in mindset for a lot of educators.
So Amy, when you're talking about, we're shifting that conversation, right? From parents and caregivers and their struggles. But what were the most effective ways that we've seen that teachers were able to help those parents become or change that mindset and become that educator in the home?
Yeah. Well, one I think was organization, to watch out for information overload. So often choice can become just overload. And I think that happened in a lot of places and parents just became overwhelmed sifting through, well, what's really important? Both in the district I was working in and then some of my colleagues shared, choosing activities that are part of your core curriculum that are developmentally appropriate and that can be used, that sort of have legs. You can use them consistently. So in the high school curriculum, something like a plan, do, review process, you can plan anything. And then you can do anything, and then you can review anything. But teaching parents how to do that process with children, how to have those conversations. Oh, we're going to grandma's today because she's going to watch you while I go to work. What do you think you're going to do there? Let's draw a picture of it. And then when mom returns or dad returns from work, reviewing that picture. Is this what really happened? You can do that every day. And so much growth can come out of that. And you can teach that process to parents. And it's not just a one-off, because again, it takes a lot of effort for many caregivers to learn to do these things. Another example was teaching parents to go outside in nature, but then journal with their children what they find. So find objects and try to draw them. That's something you could do with anywhere you are, inside the house, outside the house, but so it has those legs. You can do it over and over and over again versus, here's a link to this story. Here's a link to this Go Noodle, just random activities, which is what parents were experiencing on their end. I'm sure it wasn't meant to be that way from the way it was being given to them, but, overwhelming. And then also parents can start to feel really successful. We found a lot of parents having a lot of pride. And then I should mention too, there has to be a feedback mechanism. Parents have to be able to share these, whether it's a video clip, a photo, an uploaded sample of a drawing or a painting. There has to be a way to provide feedback because, first of all, parents need that feedback to be able to drive their children's learning forward at home, but they need that feedback emotionally too to stay invested. We found that the more communication that happened between families and teachers, the more invested and the higher quality of the interactions that were happening. So that's a huge piece too, is getting that set up. And there's so many platforms, and I'm sure Ed and LaToya can speak to that, but there's so many online platforms that can help us with that kind of feedback. And it can be asynchronous, like you were mentioning night school. We had some families that never had a live conversation, but were uploading video clips and images, and then teachers were typing feedback. So feedback can happen in many different ways to meet different families' needs. But we found that was an essential piece.
I just think about all the choices we were trying to provide parents, and I saw every district was doing that. And when you mentioned the almost the information and choice overload, I think about going down the food aisle and the cereal aisle, right, in the food store, and if you're not directed to one, you're going to get confused and overwhelmed. And I think we have to think about that with educational resources. When you offer a whole lot of resources, they can get lost on the frosted flakes, so we've got to make sure that we aim them in the right direction. And that's really important. But in giving choice, Amy, do you have any tips for us? Because now with multiple platforms and even more, I can imagine a teacher's inbox with vendors and different opportunities to join. And I know what mine looks like. So can you give us any tips that can help teachers and parents in organizing those choices?
Yes. Yeah, there are so much coming at teachers right now, and families too. Families are getting the same kind of advertising. I think one of the things that's helpful is for teachers to work, at the district level or grade level, and really provide parents with sample schedules that are really simple. And by schedule, I don't mean get up and do this, because that's impossible. Every family has such different needs, but targets, within the different developmental domains. Like, so every day we should be doing something that helps physical development, and help them understand what those targets would look like for 3s and 4s and 5s. This is what we're aiming towards. Your child being able to, skip or catch a ball. This week, here are some activities you could do. Choose one out of these 3 in this domain and do it for about this many minutes. The minutes seem to really help parents, because then you can do it at 5 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock in the morning, but that you want to aim for about, and again, is there 10 minutes better than 20? Of course not. But parents need some guardrails and some guidance to help them stay on track and feel that they've accomplished something and been successful. So we found that was really, really helpful, just breaking up some buckets, so you have the social emotional bucket, you have a physical bucket, you have this cognitive bucket that you can break down with the different, skills, some language and literacy, some math, and that really helped parents not get overwhelmed.
Oh, I feel better already, Amy. Thank you. I do. I actually, but I think I want to jump into a conversation about this field that teachers felt comfortable with, educators felt comfortable with, I felt comfortable with, in terms of using media and technology in the classroom. We all started to feel really good about ourselves. And then March 13th happened, and we are forced to become dependent upon those platforms, right? And we never were. We used them independently at our choice, but now we were dependent upon the platform to connect. Whether it be using an app that translates multiple languages to connect, or using Zoom to see kids synchronously, there were a lot of struggles along the way. There were some superstars that did amazing things, but for the most part, parents felt the struggle too. So I would love to pull LaToy and Ed into this conversation, because right now we're using media more than we ever have. So for a corporation or company that works to develop content and consult with digital media, with technology, with education, I'd love to hear your input in terms of what is most important. If you broke it down, what is most important things that districts should keep in mind when we're trying to plan and use digital media to support learning this fall?
Awesome. I'd like to start. As a research consultancy, our job is to help content developers and product developers who are creating for kids and families and teachers, primarily in early education. We work with them to build research into their production pipeline. And in order to do that work, we partner with schools and with community centers and with families to weave their opinions, their experiences with the product, with the content, with the curriculum into development, so that everything that they're creating is always with the child or family in mind. And so in doing that work, we've come to face many of the same challenges that our partners are facing, where we have to change the way we communicate with families. We have to consider new systems that we're using to communicate with families. We're consistently having conversations with school directors to understand the research we normally would come in to do in person. What is their comfort level and their willingness to continue that work online? When are they going back into school? Some of them already have. How has that experience been? So it's changing rapidly, so quickly, and in an interesting way. I think we all feel more closer to our partners, our education partners, more now than ever. And I think our empathy with them and for them is extreme. I mean, I've spent 4 years in the classroom as an aide early in my career, and it feels like I'm back in the trenches, even though I'm at home in some ways. So in these conversations that we're having, we're hearing a lot of the pain and the stress, and we're also hearing our colleagues and other experts coming back to us some of these same notes. And so Ed, please jump in here. One of the first things is quality. And so when it comes to content or curriculum, we all know that there's so many choices. And as trained professionals, we're often considering many important elements of the digital experience, in terms of whether it's appropriate for our students or for or you know, for the intended users. And we know that quality has a lot to do with whether or not the product or service is evidence-based, like have they conducted research, has it been developed in consultation with educators or consultants who study these things. And many of the services you're using or considering using may tout their research, may exclaim about how they're using research partners, or have at least conducted some internal testing, have gotten feedback from folks to understand whether or not they're on the right track, or to give them confidence that the claims that they're making are true, in fact. And so that's quality and assessing quality as educators, figuring out how you can help your families do that, you know, understand the importance of considering what quality means to them. You know, every school or district might have different opinions or ideas about what quality is, because they all have different values, right? And there may not need to be a law, or, you know, but maybe you can start with some essential questions that will help them understand, is this appropriate for my child at this age or stage in their development? How do I know what that looks like? Whether or not that that system or that tool is accessible has a lot to do with it too. So quality is one, research is another that families may not be considering. And I know that many of our partners do consider that, but maybe that's something to help as families are being creative with choosing their own path for meeting the goals, and that Amy and her colleagues are helping parents understand. Like, we want to make sure we get this many minutes of this day, and there's still so many ways you can do it. If you're gonna, you know, we recommend this tool. If you're gonna choose some others, here's some important things to consider when you're choosing, you know, some other tools. Another thing to consider that we often have to consider as researchers is the makeup of the family. So when we're recruiting families, for example, you know, let's say we're testing an app that's designed to help kids ages 4 to 6 understand math concepts. Well, if the 4-year-old is at home with an 8-year-old, that tends to pull them up in a way that it wouldn't if they were at home with, say, a 2-year-old. And so directors who know intimately exactly how many kids are there, what the makeup is, we are often working with, you know, directors who know exactly who we should be speaking to about which thing we're testing, because they know which systems they're using, they know, you know, what their comfort level is. So considering variations in the setting, which is something we're, you know, normally doing, but helping families think about how the things that naturally happen, where you're naturally deputizing some older children in the family, or cousins, or the resource, or an uncle or an auntie who might be more available now, to help them build that, lean on that village that they're already using to help their children learn and grow. Some of those folks may also be able to support them in a technology round. So ever since I was a kid, I was the one fixing the VCR back, you know, when we had those. And now, you know, the HD, I'm the one looking for the HDMI cord, you know, so I'm that person that the families, like, I can't tell you how many great aunts and uncles I helped get onto Zoom in like the last 2 months. And we're doing that, helping family members who have young children who suddenly have to get on Zoom for different reasons. So I think when we can help them understand quality, understand what is developmentally appropriate, whether or not something is research, or considering those things ourselves when we're recommending those systems or tools to these families, can be really helpful and important. And also considering like who else is at home that can help them, not just with the curriculum or with supporting children's developmental needs like a grandparent would, for example, but also with the technology needs. And sometimes a pod can be helpful in that way, where families may or may not have different levels of access, if they are comfortable with each other. So we have some participants in some of our studies, for example, families who are bringing in families from their pod to participate in these studies, because they've already agreed on their comfort level. Like, we are comfortable with how this family is is engaging in the world with COVID. They have the same values and beliefs about touching, about consent. They have their kids wear masks, and we have our kids wear masks. So those, even though there may not be the fancy pods with like the personal tutors, they're still regular, you know, everyday families who are building those tight family, familial relationships with neighbors or classmates, one or two, where they're like, okay, you can play with her because, you know, they're on the same page as us. And once they're together, helping them have those conversations about technology usage or being able to support each other with getting access, working together on some of those technological challenges they might have, can be a good place to start. And I'll switch over to Ed.
Yeah, I thank you for giving that background too. And I'm really appreciative of this opportunity because we're in a very questionable time, because one of the main concerns that I've experienced has been the health and well-being of the individuals who are in those early childhood settings, whether they're working, you know, remotely or not. And many of the people, when COVID hit, I know that, Michael, you were talking about the fact that, you know, people were getting comfortable with using media and looking at issues of how technology can work. But unfortunately, in early childhood, and it's not that it's not true in other areas, that level of comfort has been not necessarily shared by everyone. And in some instances in our field, it's been a bone of contention. So I say that only to say that there's a lot for all of us to be able to learn. And so creating some pods of individuals who are working in those settings and supporting them is going to be important. I've been working as LaToya was mentioning, with a variety of different programs. One was with a director in Connecticut, who has a predominantly Latino population. And when COVID hit, they were trying to provide support for a wide variety of needs, and those included essential workers. Over 90% of the children in those programs were children of essential workers. So sending the children home left a lot, you know, to be reckoned with. And so many people have struggled with how to use what we do have in terms of digital media and technology to build bridges. But early childhood people, for the most part, have had to deal with a variety of issues, whether it's family engagement, as well as looking at the needs of what we want children to know and be able to do, and giving them access to opportunities to play. But when we sent the children home, and we sent them home in settings where there were essential workers who had to leave, that opened up another whole set of issues in terms of how does that take place. So this one particular center actually began to use a morning circle time using Zoom to help whoever it was who was at home with those particular children to be able to structure that day. And I think, Amy, when you mentioned the issue of a schedule, in that instance, it wasn't just, you know, should we do letters and numbers or color right now? It's so how can I manage my morning? So they developed a way of getting a 45-minute block of time where whoever the caregiver was able to come together, and the teacher from the center, who was not working with children but was in the center, conducted the Zoom. By doing songs, by doing, you know, the social emotional learning issues of how are you doing today, and having one activity. And they were doing it adult child, because what happens in most of these instances, there is a dyad or a single child in front of a screen for however long, possibly with an adult, but sometimes with an adult that's doing something else, like preparing a meal or taking care of a sibling. So one of the things they tried to do was to begin to take their staff and look at, well, what is it that we can provide in this environment that helps to support that adult who at that moment was able to maybe be in front of of the screen with the child. But having those materials, having those other kinds of things. So they immediately switched to having a period of time, which was in the evening, where they did a Zoom call with a social worker, with parents, to be able to say, how are you doing? What kinds of things do you need? And when there was a possibility of even setting up some opportunities to pick up materials that have been used in the classroom and bag them and do that very carefully. So I'm saying to you that some of the tools and resources that we have to use in a variety of ways, some of which have very little to do with instructional strategies and pedagogy. A lot has to do with how to create those experiences that will support safe environments that encourage questioning, probing, problem solving, and play within the context of the home. I wanted to say also, creating communities of practice. A lot of programs have had the opportunity to maybe have instructional leadership teams or teams within their centers, and they talk to each other about what they're planning for children. And this is before COVID, you know. Some didn't, some never did. Some actually were doing things that everybody has the same book. We preach from the same Bible. You do the activity. Never talk to each other about what's happening across groups. But one of the things that is happening is that dialogues are taking place. For example, with the Technology and Young Children Interest Forum of NAEYC. Now I mention that because they're trying to form a community of practice to help people understand how they can do things that are constructive, but also share those stories about how those different ways of interacting are actually beginning to impact their lives. So when I go back to something like essential workers who are going to be going back to work, and if there is a split kind of day or week or whatever it is that they do with the reduced staff-child ratio, they're looking at things like, how do children and families become digital creators and digital storytellers so that they use things that they are able to bring from who they are as people, telling stories about specific themes, using particular pieces of software or apps to help do that can be included. So one of the things that I'm trying to do now is just to share resources that are coming from those kinds of groups to help support the individuals who have a myriad of issues that they're trying to address, not one. Sandra Gutierrez from Abriendo Puertas, which is an organization that's based out of California that works primarily with families, has been doing a lot of this work in conjunction with Maria Alvarez from Common Sense Latino. Common Sense Latino and Common Sense Media have been putting out bilingual short form videos to help families understand how to use some of this stuff that's even being directed to them. So I've included in the chat some of the things that Maria shared with me, like a list of bilingual videos that talk about things like, so what do you need to know about Zoom in language that people can understand? Or tips that parents can use in terms of Class Dojo. How many, some programs are using it, some people don't even know what it is. They're in English and Spanish. So for the practitioners who are working with children and families, another way that they can do family engagement to connect to how it is that they want to use some of these tools, have access to resources that can help do that kind of bridging. So Common Sense Media is a wonderful place to be able to do that. The other thing is that I don't know if you're familiar with Tech Balance, but Tech Balance is the new initiative of Common Sense Media that is a phone-based app, a text-based app that sends messages to families about different kinds of things that they can do to support their children. And all you do is, if you have a text package, you go to 21555 and you put that in and you're able to have a message come to you to at least give you some things that you can do, whether it's informally or if you're sitting down to do something in a more structured way. So there are resources out there that are using digital media and technology as tools to help people feel like they can at least cope with what it is that's being directed to them because when centers closed down, all of a sudden people were supposed to become preschool teachers in their homes. Most of them will tell you now, open the center back up. I need some help. I think, also, there are a variety of different tools that I think people can have access to. But I just want to go back to one thing, and that's really important. Before COVID ever hit, NAYC had a position statement in 2012 from NAYC and the Fred Rogers Center on technology and interactive media as tools in early childhood programs serving birth through age 8. It's a position statement that talks about what we need to pay attention to. So whether it's pre-COVID, COVID, or post-COVID, we need to go back to the basics and understand some of this stuff can't do what it is that people are trying to make it do. And there are some school districts that oversee pre-K that are using one size fits all to get people to do these kinds of things, like, sending home activities for the children, but no support for those people in pre-K who can't just send home a worksheet. So we need to also begin to do some more advocacy that draws from those principles that say what we should be doing to use these, as Chip Donahue would say, as tools, not as the total curriculum. I would just sort of put that out there. There's more encouraging resources, and I put some in the chat box, but I'll just sort of stop there. But I do want people to realize it's not equal. I mean, when you start thinking about the populations that are being served, I'm working with a group in Trenton right now. They're having trouble just getting people to come back, let alone trying to figure out whether they can put something online or give people an app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I'd add about Tech Balance is that the content on Tech Balance is delivered about twice weekly. The users can choose to receive it in English or Spanish. And it is quite there are users who identify themselves as educators. So there are educators who are involved, there are parents who are involved, there are grandparents who are involved. You can, meet people in the community. And we are associated with that program. So just full transparency there in terms of being a part of their research efforts. It's something that we're very proud to be associated with, to be able to support. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that now is I know that a lot of our education partners have been conducting research for the first time on their staff and their parents. And they'd always understood in a very, in their blood, in their veins, in the oxygen, who the families were and what their needs were and who the teachers were and what their needs were. But for the first time, they really needed to get their ducks in a row and making sure that school directors and teachers have all of the resources that they need to conduct very basic surveys and get a true understanding of who these families are and what their needs are. And maybe even considering creative ways to gather information from families and from the teachers and staff can be a very powerful way to make decisions, important decisions that are going to affect folks. So someone in one of the attendees here asked, how many activities are realistic for a family to do at home? Well, it's going to depend. If a family has a stay-at-home parent who's capable of and has the patience, maybe they're a retired teacher and they're getting all the activities done. And what if if one or more parents are essential workers, then they may not have that access. So one good way to answer that question is to conduct the research and understand what your families are needing. And that's a question you could ask. You can ask how now is a great time to get a sense of how's it been and what were your main struggles. And you may not have the answers, you may not know how to help them, but it's a good place to start when you're trying to get ready for the new school year and understand. I know folks are already asking parents, are you even coming back? They're already in touch, getting at the numbers in terms of participation in the program formally. But you can also do that. You can also use those same channels and communication tools to understand their technology capabilities, what devices they have. You can, which of the following devices You know, do your family, do your children use?
So Latoya was really pointing out so many great suggestions there and questions. Amy, you wanted to build upon something that Ed was saying. Latoya, you froze on us for a second. I just wanted to jump to Amy because we're running out of time here.
Yeah,
Amy,
just really quickly, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I just wanted to build a little bit on what Ed was saying about the importance of the video, of using video to help people understand how to do things. And I think one of the opportunities this presents is, you know, obviously in the beginning, we had a lot of our staff creating these videos to talk about how you might do plan, do, review, or do an activity like that, and the developmental ranges. But over time, as parents began to do this, and we began to be able to see those videos and provide them with feedback, we asked parents if it was okay for us to share those videos with other parents. And so for the fall, we have decided we have a website for our school where this is all located. So no matter who's watching the child on any given day, anyone can access it. So there's going to be now a parent tab of parents helping parents, which I think is, so far the response has been really strong. You wouldn't believe how many parents were like, absolutely. And it's very empowering because it's our own community. And a lot of the parents know each other. So to see, you know, someone say, this is how I did it. This is how I survived. This is where I got the materials. This is, one parent showed how she used cardboard to create like a foldable workspace for her child. So I would just encourage districts to use their parents as resources in that way, because it's very powerful to other parents in helping empower them.
And a quick plug, I have a little bias because I also was trained in high school, but I've been working with this one particular center and having them talk about ways that they can help the teachers have language that they use with the children, even about experiences. The 5 ingredients of active learning, giving kids access to materials, giving them choice and how they're manipulating them, whatever they are, getting language from the children, meaning giving parents or teachers language to use to get, what are you doing? Find out what the children know, and providing those supports for the adults. So those 5 ingredients for active learning are important because you can also determine what things are more appropriate to use other strategies, be they digital or be they non-technical, to actually get people thinking, oh, I can use a different tool or I can use a different approach. But we need to keep things active, regardless of whether they have lots of materials or not. They can have those 5 ingredients of active learning to help. And I think that that's another way to help people have some common language as well.
Well, I just want to stop there because of time. And I want to thank Latoya Adams. I mean, you don't even realize what you shared with us today in terms of your journey, that you were in a classroom as an instructional assistant, and you are now the founder and president of this company. So what a great path. And that was you just shared that in a small moment, but it's certainly something to celebrate. Ed, your tips and your resources have been outstanding. And Amy, your practical knowledge of what's happening in the homes and the classrooms in each district were awesome. And Steve, I think I was looking at the chat. There are a lot of questions for you that I think you have to consider. And maybe because of time, is there a way that you and some of the folks at NEAR can answer some of those questions and put it out with our video when we put it out there? Because they certainly deserve an answer. And I know we're just running out of time, but you just have to unmute yourself.
Can you pull the questions off the Q&A?
I sure can, yes. And
we'll answer all of them.
Great, perfect. Well, Steve, thank you. Amy, Latoya, Ed, thank you very much for today. Next week, if you're interested, you could join us. Dave Nash from NJPSA is coming out to talk about legal issues, everybody's favorite topic. So if you're interested in joining, he'll be there for the following week to talk about supervision. And so next week, July 30th, the following week, August 6th. So thank you all for taking the time. Look for NEAR to send out some answers to your questions. Have a great day, everybody. And thank you for joining us, to our guest panelists, all right? Have a good
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.